No deal. The Putin-Trump Summit in Alaska has come and gone, and the two parties walked away with ambiguous references to agreed upon points during what both Putin and Trump called constructive talks. Putin now spoke for two-thirds of the non-press presser, while Trump delivered some optics of dominance and diktats while admitting that there was one big point that they just couldn't agree upon. What's obvious is that Russia is not interested in ceasing the war without the root causes of the conflict being resolved, and that a ceasefire wasn't mentioned at all publicly during the summit. While Russia's position has not changed, the summit is sending Russia's adversaries in DC, Brussels, and Kiev into a panic. To discuss all of this and more, I have with me good friend of the show, journalist and geopolitical analyst Pepe Escobar of The Cradle, Sputnik, Strategic Culture, and so much more. Pepe, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Danny. Good to see all of you, our audience. And wow, talk about interesting times.
Yeah, well, we spoke before we came on, Pepe, and I said it's a new world, and some in the Western mainstream media. I want to open with this before we get to the details of what was actually done during the summit, because I think this clip right here is very instructive of how things went.
It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his. It was just.
So Putin came in and steamrolled Pepe. What exactly in your mind happened? Because there was no actual agreed upon deal that came out of this, but at the same time, now we're having talks about some of Putin and Russia's positions now actually being forwarded in future talks with Zelensky, with the EU, etc. So talk about this, because that's a huge shift for the Russian side, not so much in their position, but in the dominance of their position.
Well, I cannot help but start with Blondie out there. Obviously, she's never seen Putin in action in a top of the line meeting, especially the ones in Russia or across Asia. He didn't steamroll anything. He didn't have to. He was greeted with, I would say, outstanding politeness by Trump. But this was very, very good from the beginning. The tone was set already at the airport, including the aerial show, of course, with B2, the whole thing. But from the beginning, we could tell that there was a chemistry going on. And they both told each other, I'm going to help you and I'm going to help you. Putin said in English at the airport already, I'm here to help you. And Trump also said, I will help you. Very, very important from the start. So this contradicted all the doomsday apocalyptic predictions before. And contradicted many of us. We didn't have high expectations for the summit at all. And after a while, and after the first hour, and after the second hour, and then we got to 150 minutes, we could tell already that they were really talking. And that means details about the reset of the strategic relationship between the superpowers, way beyond Ukraine, of course. So, contrary to all expectations, it was a success, all the way to the non-presser, of course. No? We were all expecting at least, 20 minutes, half an hour at least, of back and forth questions. But, of course, this is not confirmed by either side. There was certainly an agreement after that first, was 30 seconds or 45 seconds when they entered the room. We had the 3+3 in the room, and that horde of savage hyenas from basically U.S. mainstream media hurling all sorts of on both. Probably at Team Trump 2.0 and Team Putin decided, okay, we're going to have two presentations at the end, and that's it. It makes total sense. They even the Trump team, they would not be, because very, very important. This is something that Blondie, in the tape that you played, she doesn't say. The American part of the room was extremely hostile to Putin. To Trump, to Putin, obviously, and to Trump as well. They were extremely hostile to the big players. So obviously it makes total sense. So why are you going to deign to answer those stupid questions? I already know them from the beginning. So what we had was Putin he was making a presentation following his notes. So this means, you know, he went exactly to the key points that needed to be stressed. And from Trump's side, obviously, it was an ad lib improv.
It was.
As usual, we were used to it, all right? We know.
I don't want to play the presser, Pepe, really quick, but I want to just show, just here you see, as you're saying, we won't play any of it because I think your explanation will be definitely great for this. But look, if you see, Putin spoke all the way up into the 8th minute of 12 minutes. I believe he finished close to 8:30, and Trump spoke for 4. And this drove the United States establishment wild. Because he dominated. And the way that Putin did it, Pepe, was it reminded me of how he approached the Tucker Carlson interview in a very, very kind of small situation, much more microcosmic situation. But continue.
Yes. So, okay. To set the tone about the most important decisions, I'm going to give you, Danny, and our audience, 2 quotes. The first quote is by President Putin himself. Pay very close attention to it. It's probably one of the few times that Trump, in one sentence only, sums up a very, very detailed geopolitical discussion. This was published on Truth Social. It was determined by all, this means both delegations, that's already very, very big, that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. We have to, okay, take a minute, all of you, to examine what's been said here. It's immensely important because in one sentence, Trump completely destroys the reasoning of NATO, the EU, and the backers of the Nazi fascists in Kiev, with a few words, in fact. So this is what he really wants. And this is what, at the same time, Putin managed to impress on Trump's brain. We need an overall solution. Ukraine is part of it. So we solve, theoretically, the proxy war that obviously Putin would not say that outright, that you, Empire of Chaos, started against us using Ukraine as a proxy. But the most important thing is the reset of our strategic relations. Very, very important. Now compare this Trump quote with Medvedev. And as we know, Medvedev is not a very moderate, calculist, meticulous strategist as Putin. Medvedev is on the blunt side with some trolling aspects, makes him immensely entertaining. But at the same time, he's a former president of Russia. He's for all practical purposes, the number 2 in Russia. So whatever Medvedev says, if he's trolling or when he gets very serious, which is the case here, we have to pay attention. So, quoting Medvedev, the president of Russia personally and in detail presented to the US president our conditions for ending the conflict in Ukraine. This is immensely important because we can see by Trump's reaction that he's finally starting to get the picture. And he had to listen from Putin himself. So we can imagine there was some serious background involved in the discussions. And we could even venture to say that Sergei Lavrov had his 10 minutes, because Lavrov is probably the number one person on the planet apart from Putin who knows the dossier back and forth, coming back to 1991. Is not only coming back to Maidan or the start of the SMO. Lavrov knows everything about everything when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. So obviously, and it is quite interesting that Putin made a reference to Lavrov sitting in the first row during the non-presser presser, pointing to him. I love that, because this means Putin pays a lot of attention and deeply respects Lavrov personally, not only professionally, but personally. So this is the first part of the Medvedev quote. Second part, most importantly, in Medvedev's words, both sides directly place responsibility for achieving future results in negotiations on ending hostilities on Kyiv and Europe. Can you believe that Medvedev is saying the same thing that Trump said in his Truth Social post? That's absolutely, that's immensely impressive. And I would say that these two quotes are the resume of what really happened during these 150 minutes. And of course, none of us was expecting it would go this way. And to this degree of, I wouldn't say understanding, but at least from the American side, a deeper understanding of the underlying causes of the whole drama, which is what Putin, Medvedev, Lavrov, everybody has been insisting for 3.5 years, at least. And then something very, very important, Danny and all of you, our audience, concerning, in fact, BRICS. Don't forget, Putin was there also as a top BRICS representative in the middle of a hybrid war, tariff war, in some cases hot war against Iran, cold war against the BRICS as a whole. So Trump was over there representing Xi, Modi, Lula, etc. Very, very important. Who did Putin speak to before he went to Alaska?
All the BRICS, yes.
Not only all the BRICS, Danny, but especially Xi Jinping.
Yep.
Especially Xi Jinping. And of course, he spoke to Lula, he spoke to Modi, absolutely important. And Xi and Putin, we can say, after Alaska, the guys who are really writing the script for this big geostrategic game, they are Xi, and it's Putin and Xi. They are Xi and Putin together. So this is what the BRICS and the Global South are going to get from this meeting. And very, very important, at least for the moment, Trump apparently promised not to slap sanctions on BRICS members, at least for what? For the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depends on how it goes from now on, or probably before their second meeting, which, as we all know, the whole planet knows, including lizards in islands in Java, that Putin officially invited Trump to go to Moscow for the next meeting in English. And obviously, that was yesterday, of course. I was switching between channels, of course, taking a look. And these imbeciles in CNN, BBC, etc., they still don't understand the fact that Putin understands English perfectly. And he speaks relatively well. He never speaks English in public because it's a matter of national pride and a diplomatic matter as well. He speaks Russian, his own language. But he understands perfectly well English, and he doesn't even need a translator. He has translators only for the finer points. He doesn't even need translators. For instance, there's a dialogue that was caught by Russian cameras backstage. I published a little photo about this on my X. They had a Russian translator, which is probably the #1 Russian translator who was translating for Putin in Alaska. But Trump and Putin are talking directly, and Putin is answering directly to Trump without even resorting to his translator. And this happened from the beginning at the tarmac at the airport. So this facilitated things enormously, in fact. So we're expecting this degree of politeness and understanding coming from the American side, especially, and none of us did. So this was an enormous surprise. Now, of course, the whole devil in the details start now. Is it possible to sell from Trump's part anything to the neocons, to a great deal of US ruling elites, to the Atlanticist elites, from the East Coast all the way to the big capitals in Europe, and especially all the way to those big families in the UK, the City of London, etc. Not to mention the whole Brussels complex, NATO, EU, and then all the way to all those Nazi fascists behind Zelensky in Kiev. No, we know it's impossible. And he has already started with this phone call with Trump himself said, look, it was tough. When he says that, this means obviously they are beyond horrified. If their mainstream media, which is beyond pitiful, and I did some scrolling this morning on UK, Italy, Germany, and France, mainstream media, basically, and they are beyond cataleptic, you know. Can you imagine the people who really run the show in the Atlanticist sphere? So it starts on Monday, the heavy work. Very, very important. Considering what was leaked so far, from the American side, not much. From the Russian side, there's some stuff that I'm basically keeping to for my column, which I plan to publish on Monday. And I would like to have some extra confirmation during this weekend. But one of the things that I was told by my interlocutors in Moscow, and this is very, very important, Danny and all of you, because in the long breakdown that they sent me, this was point #1. Let me see if I find it here. Give me just 1 second, please. Okay, I will quote without quoting. So this came from a very good source, very close to some of the members who were there, not necessarily on the table. Yes, on the table, yes, because this means Lavrov. And of course, we have very good relations with the Minister of Foreign Relations, but also with Belousov and Silvanov. When they were both approached by Russian media after the summit, both Silvanov and Belousov, finance and defense, they both said it was excellent. And these guys, they don't have this sort of adjectives in their mouths all the time. So I'm gonna quote the first point of what I received. It was firmly put. And this was firmly put by the Russian delegation, by Putin, Lavrov, and of course Ushakov. Stop all direct U.S. weapon deliveries to Ukraine as a vital step towards the solution. Of course, there's no question that the Russians had to tell Putin and the Americans directly this thing. And very important. Americans accepted the fact that it's necessary to dramatically decrease lethal shipments. You see, this is nuance. It's not that they're going to stop, but they will dramatically decrease. And obviously, who's going to pick up the slack? NATO. And okay, Europe is key in this solution. So they are being very circumspect. No? They regularly supply and arm Zelensky, so let them keep doing it. This is what one of our interlocutors said. Let them keep supporting Ukraine financially and keep arming them. But there's an enormous problem. Then, and there is a discussion about numbers. And the Russian side came to the conclusion, even before going to Alaska, that the NATO-EU compound, they don't have the money to keep supporting Kiev, and they don't have the weapons. Even if they start buying tons of American weapons paid in euros that, by the way, they don't have. First, they need to get the euros paying exorbitant interest rates to buy these American weapons. And then they can think of restart weaponizing Kiev. So this supply chain is not going to work on both sides, on the military side and on the financial side. The Russians know it, and obviously Trump and his team, they also know it. So this brings us back to what might be Trump's strategy. He's going to talk to, he's already talking to NATO, not to EU, European Commission. You cannot imagine Trump picking up the phone to call Brussels and talk to the toxic Medusa. Forget it. He's going to talk to NATO only, because NATO is what matters. And they said, look, we are trying to find a solution, etc. Okay, what is your position? And we know what's the position. NATO's position is the American position. And then we have all the chihuahuas barking right and left. Okay, so you want to continue the war, and we're trying to find an overarching solution for everything. Okay, the war is yours. So find the money to buy our weapons and pay us in euros from now on. That's it. Very, very simple. So Trump's argument is very straightforward. And we can say that after Alaska, this was refined to one sentence. His phone call to NATO and his conversation with Zelensky Monday in Washington, that's it. It's one sentence. Okay, the war continues if the Europeans pay for your war. And we're going to be out of it. It has nothing to do with us anymore. We are interested in having an overall reset, restart of U.S.-Russia strategic relations. So, Danny, this is, let's say, the major headline and, you know, the first 3-4 paragraphs. If this was an article, you see. There's much more, of course, but this is the breakdown of what really mattered. And once again, none of us were expecting this. It was a surprise. It was.
Yeah. You know, and I'm curious, Pepe, on how much this is too. And I want to play a brief clip of Trump on Hannity, yes, what he said about this one big point they can't agree on. In my assessment, I don't know how much this was about coming to some kind of Trump-Putin deal for peace more than it was kind of allowing the United States to punt this to Europe, to Kiev. If they disagree, the war continues. But Russia doesn't really... Russia's not panicking about that because they're winning. And so, as you said, they're willing to let the United States punt it, and the United States will still be involved. Obviously, as you said, Europe can't do this. Ukraine can't do this without the U.S. They won't do it well anyway. But this allows Russia to then work on these other points that you said are so critical. And so you can comment on that, but I did want to play, before we move on to a different angle on this major issue he said they can't agree on, because I think this might be kind of this way of keeping the maybe the the neocons as happy as they can be in this dire moment for them. Here we go.
Make a lot of progress. The meeting took place in this room.
Yeah,
this is where you met. right in this
You
room.
think? Well, let me examine it. Oh, there it is.
That's where you were sitting.
That's it. I would say that's it. Yep.
So did you have alone time with him?
Yeah, I did. I did actually after our speeches. He made a very good speech, and I also finished it up. And afterwards, we spoke. Right after that, we spoke very sincerely. I think he wants to see it done.
Yeah. In your press conference, you talked about a lot of things that you agreed on, and maybe one big issue you don't agree on. Are you prepared to go public with that?
No, I'd rather not. I guess somebody's going to go public with it. They'll figure it out. But no, I don't want to do that. I want to see if we can get it done. You know, it's not a done deal at all. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine has to agree. I mean, you know, President Zelensky has to agree. But it's a terrible war where he's.
So I wanted to stop it there, Pepe, because he literally says somebody's going to leak it. There's this one big point. And then he talks about Ukraine. So it's obviously about Ukraine.
It's obviously about Ukraine.
Agree on. And so that's what, to my other point, though, that's like for me, that's like where Russia comes in to all of this and says, yeah, we can more than tolerate this posture from the United States and from Trump, because no matter what happens, we're working to get more of what we want, no matter what. But your assessment.
Of course, what they agreed upon is secret. And obviously, this was inbuilt from the start in that crucial sentence by Ushakov immediately after the Witkoff visit to Moscow, when Ushakov said, the Americans have presented a proposal that we consider acceptable. So this was already in the original Trump proposal. And this was what made Putin study it carefully, propose Alaska for a face-to-face meeting, was basically to discuss this acceptable proposal. That's the chain of the most important part in this chain of events. This means that for Putin and the Security Council to consider American proposal, this means that apparently, we don't know the details, of course, Trump and at least some around him understand finally the underlying causes of the whole Ukrainian tragedy. Can we bet on it? No, we can't. But consider that Lavrov was in the room. Once again, Lavrov had time to explain to Trump. And in 150 minutes, if Lavrov had 10, Lavrov can explain the whole thing in 10 minutes to anybody. So this is very, very important. And of course, business. Why Trump wants an overall deal and a reset of strategic relations between US and Russia, essentially. Business deals. And what about oil and gas, once again? Where? In the Arctic and Eastern Siberia. So very, very important. Okay, let me see the dates. I think it was on the same day. Where is it? Yes. On the same day of the meeting in Alaska, Putin signed a decree, very, very important. And with this decree, it will become possible for ExxonMobil to come back to Russia and start investing again in the Sakhalin-1, a gigantic gas project in the Sakhalin Islands. In October 2022, this is a very important story because in October 2022, the management of the Sakhalin-1 project was transferred to Rosneft completely through a Rosneft subsidiary. And at the time, ExxonMobil, they had 30% of these shares. They withdrew completely. Don't forget, this was a few months after the start of the SMO. Lots of sanctions, zillions of sanctions on Russia. So ExxonMobil had to leave. And basically what Putin was telling Exxon is you have to leave. There's no way you can start, you can continue to work here because of the sanctions, and it's impossible even to move funds. So Exxon, they had 30% of the shares of this gigantic gas project. The other ones who were part of the project, they stayed, an Indian company and a Japanese company. But Exxon, they exited, and you know how much Exxon lost by exiting the Russian market, and specifically this project, $4.6 billion. This in the oil gas universe in the US and on Trump's universe is a lot of money. So we have to make it possible for ExxonMobil to come back to Russia. So this means what? Trump 2.0, they're already studying which sanctions they have to lift so ExxonMobil can come back to Sakhalin 1. So this, I quote all that just as an example to all of you of the real interests behind the possibility of a reset. Of course, we're not getting to the most complicated part, which is nuclear missiles, a possible renewal of the INF treaty, etc. In terms of Trump, what registers is business deals. And oil and gas for big American companies in Russia, in collaboration, for instance, with Rosneft, that's, holy grail. So, in 2 weeks is the Vladivostok Economic Forum. I'll be there. And this will be one of my first questions to anybody that I meet, especially meeting Rosneft executives. Have to ask them right away. So it's true that ExxonMobil sooner or later is going to go back and you're going to work together again in the Sakhalin Islands. Let's see. So, and this ball is rolling very, very fast. So let's assume that Trump 2.0, Trump himself probably doesn't know. Let's assume that Trump 2.0 is very much aware of what's going to happen 2 weeks from now between Russia and China. First of all, Putin and Xi Jinping are going to meet again. September 3, Beijing, commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War from the Chinese point of view, and of course, the Japanese occupation of China, which for the Chinese is even more important than the war against Nazi fascist powers. Very important. And on the 3rd, 2 days after, on the same day that Putin will be in Beijing with Xi Jinping, is the start of the Vladivostok Forum, where I can imagine that there will be more Americans than last year, for instance, this year, because they will be there already. Okay, we want to be part of this huge Russian national interest drive to a super economic infrastructure network to be set up in the Arctic and in the Far East at the same time, which is usually the basic theme of the Vladivostok Economic Forum. So this is going to happen in 2 weeks from now. Like it's literally tomorrow. And obviously, people around Trump must have told him, look, you know that Putin talked to Xi before he talked to you. And they're going to talk again after Alaska. So this is where the top BRICS connection, once again, I have to re-emphasize this to all of you, our audience. They are acting in very, very close conjunction, especially Russia and China. And of course, Putin is going to brief Modi, Lula, and everybody else about. We don't know how deep, because for the moment, the agreements between Putin and Trump that were more or less solidified in Alaska, they are secret for everybody. And they don't want any leaks from the American side and from the Russian side. So, for instance, what the best informed Russian diplomats, analysts, what they got so far is not too many details. It's the stuff that I received this morning from Moscow, and It's already a lot, but as you can see, no details, no specifics, right? But it's very, very important, and it's all connected. The timing, the overall, let's say, purpose for Trump on how to get a reset of relations linked to business, and the fact that if the US are kept out of the whole Russia-China development, economic integration, and all that, that's it. You're out of the big picture, because this is the big picture among BRICS. Yeah. Because Russia and China are driving this interconnection and this economic integration all across Eurasia. So, of course, we don't have a Brzezinski type inside Trump 2.0. These people, when we look at the dream team on one side and the rookies on the other side at the beginning, did you see the beginning? And then when it was 5-5, I did the breakdown of the dream team and the rookies, and it was wow, very embarrassing, very, very embarrassing. And 3-3 was still embarrassing. How can you compare Lavrov with little Marco Rubio? And how can you compare Ushakov, old fox, with Witkoff? You
know. Pepe, let's actually keep on with this, because we haven't spoken since this war on BRICS led by the U.S. The Trump administration really exploded leading into the Alaska meeting. And, you know, Donald Trump's administration, Donald Trump in particular, very aware of BRICS, very aware not only of BRICS, but of course the top BRICS, Russia and China, and what they're doing. But this is how Donald Trump frames how he's dealt with this. And I believe that normalization with Russia could very well be a push to do what Donald Trump has said since before he was elected, which is to pull them apart. But this is exactly the point he makes here.
Mm-hmm. Something that was unthinkable. He drove, and Obama too. I stopped it, and then, you know, we had a tragedy happen. Actually, it was a tragedy. The election was a tragedy, but he did something that was unthinkable. He drove China and Russia together. That's not good. If you are just a minor student of history, it's the one thing you didn't want to do, because they're basically natural enemies. Russia has tremendous amounts of land. China has tremendous amounts of people, and China needs Russia land.
So this is how it's interpreted. It's terrible, right? And China wants Russian land.
It's so childish, isn't it?
But even
go ahead.
Sorry. Even Lindsey Graham, I'll just play this really quick. You know, Lindsey Graham over and over and over again acts like he's the foreign policy chief of the Trump administration, but he always ends every comment on the conflict now with punishing BRICS. So here we go.
The news you made in this interview, to me, is earth-shattering. President Trump said that Putin wants him to meet with Zelensky, that Putin is now apparently agreeing to a trilateral meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. That's the biggest breakthrough of the night. I've never heard that before. If we have that meeting, I think there will be an honorable and just end to this war before Christmas, well before Christmas. If that meeting doesn't come about, then I think Trump's going to have to use severe consequences against Putin and those who buy his oil and gas.
So those who buy his oil and gas, aka BRICS, India, China. So Pepe, talk about where the BRICS element comes into Donald Trump's, which and it hasn't been any secret, despite all of the provocations and all of the ups and downs, mainly downs with U.S.-Russia relations under this administration so far leading into this meeting. It's no secret that normalization is a big part of the quote unquote strategy. So, but it has a lot to do with BRICS, I believe. Your thoughts?
Well, once again, Trump proves that he has absolutely no clue specifically about the Russia-China strategic partnership. It's not the Otto Pan administration that brought them close together. Obviously, we could not expect Trump to go to the Vladivostok Forum, for instance. 10 years ago, 2000, even before that, if I remember well, already by 2013, 2014. Okay, let's say 10 years ago, 2015, they were already discussing a closer integration in Vladivostok, Russia, and China. That was in the beginning of the Xi Jinping era. Xi Jinping era started in 2012. 2013 was the beginning of the new Silk Roads. By 2015, the Russians were already saying, we are part of the new Silk Roads. We want to do a project side by side with China. And usually these were discussed in the St. Petersburg Forum, usually in June, and in Vladivostok every September. So this was, don't forget, very, very important. This was already a reaction against the Obama administration's so-called pivot to Asia, which was an idea that started in the State Department by Kurt Campbell. He conceptualized a pivot to Asia. Hillary appropriated the concept, and she did it. At the time, she wrote a long piece on foreign affairs saying that this was her contribution. And obviously, pivot to Asia, in the end, nothing happened. But Russia and China were paying very close attention. And this when BRICS were still developing little by little, the first half of the previous decade. But once again, 10 years ago, by 2015, the relationship was very, very close. And after Maidan, after 2014, started to pick up speed. So obviously, okay, to imagine that Trump would have done his own homework, he doesn't do his homework on anything. But at least somebody on Trump 2.0 could get 10 minutes to explain the basics to him, or give him an article, something, nothing, of course. So he doesn't know. And he still doesn't know how the degree of collaboration and interaction between the top BRICS after he launched his tariff dementia overdrive. He has no idea how he brought them together. It has nothing to do with the past. Trump brought the BRICS even closer together because of his tariff war. That's the number one point. We never had before a situation where we had 4 or 5 of the top BRICS leaders exchanging phone calls day after day among themselves. This is exactly what happened these past few days.
Yes.
Very, very important. And the fact that they were paying very close attention to Alaska, once again, because they knew that Putin was representing them. And this, let's say this, I would say a very, very little victory for BRICS for the moment. There won't be extra sanctions against them, at least for the moment. So this implies that the Russians have to keep oiling the Trump machine, including the flattery machine. And Putin is a master at that. Yeah, I'm sure you all noticed yesterday when Trump was glowing, saying that Putin told me that this war would never have happened if I was in charge. So this is the art of strategic flattery. And Putin and people around him, they really know how to apply it. Maybe even Lavrov could have told that to Trump in the room during the meeting. So Trump still doesn't understand BRICS. He knows, the only thing he knows that BRICS are a threat. Why? Essentially because of the de-dollarization. Right? They don't even talk about they are doing de-dollarization without calling it de-dollarization. And of course, there is the reverse Nixon angle as well. Yeah. He might think that he would be able to apply a reverse Nixon. This means that he doesn't understand everything around the Russia-China strategic partnership. And now how it's getting. Wow, it is already as close as it can be. Historica is closest ever.
And getting closer
and Wang Yi is saying every week, right, Danny? We still have margin to keep going up. It's a rocket. It's an interstellar rocket. The strategic partnership. And can you imagine what's going to happen on Monday? Wang Yi is going to India. Could you imagine that only a few days ago? No, of course not. During BRICS, when I was talking to our academic Chinese friends over there, they were all complaining the lack of trust between India and China. 3 to 4 weeks later, Wang Yi in person is going to talk to Jaishankar in India. That's extraordinary. Of course, this all has to do with this closer BRICS integration. And what Lula said a few days ago totally applies. This was one of Lula's best moments in these past few years. He said, we are working towards a comprehensive and coordinated BRICS position against the tariff war. So I wonder if anybody on Trump 2.0 understands this process. Probably not. Probably not.
And what's incredible about what Lula has also said in recent days is, while we've talked about how difficult, complicated, how it might not be possible in the near future, but he's even talking about we need to experiment with our own currency together. And just by taking that leap, I've been saying this, just by taking that leap, he's putting a huge amount of positive pressure on BRICS to continue on with the de-dollarization without the de-dollarization term, as you called it.
Yes, and this is where we were, Danny, at the end of the BRICS summit in Kazan last year. Then there was a long lull. November, December, January, February, March, almost 5 months, nothing happened. The Brazilians only woke up by March to April. That they had a summit in early July and there was nothing happening. And typical Brazil, at the last minute, they delivered. It was a huge success. Everybody worked their asses off. Sherpas, everybody, BRICS Business Council people, you name it, all the committees, etc. And of course, it was not by accident that the day after the end of the BRICS summit in Rio, Trump came with his renewed offensive against BRICS. He sensed the danger. And that's the merit of the success of the BRICS summit in Rio in the end, where, of course, there was no spectacular breakthrough, but basically there was, once again, very important to stress that, all linked to the final declaration, the Rio declaration, the final declaration. We are BRICS. This is what we're doing. We have a clarity of purpose. Nothing will make us deviate from our purpose. And that's it. This is our list of intentions. That was very, very serious. And they are working on several levels already. And the most important thing is increased trade using their own currencies and partners, including partners' currencies as well. The 10 full members and the 10 partners. And of course, the immense possibilities of growth. And after the tariff war goes against the partners as well. It's not only against BRICS. For instance, the Southeast Asians. So, and this closer interconnection that we didn't have before with BRICS. Southeast Asia now is in full force inside BRICS, with a full member Indonesia and Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand. Very, very important. And when the Americans look at that, they say, oh my God, these are escaping from it. Yes, it is escaping from you as we speak. Absolutely. And of course, 2 Central Asians, very, very important as partners, immensely important. So the thing is, when we look at the spectrum of people on Trump 2.0 in positions of power or in positions of implementing policy, do these people understand anything BRICS related that's going on? Obviously not. Obviously not. And many of them are neocon, even if they are not nominal neocons, they are neocon minded.
Right.
So
yeah, and they see BRICS, the entirety of the establishment, and Donald Trump himself sees BRICS as kind of like these chess pieces to knock off of a board. And what's so interesting about what just happened between Putin and Trump is that, you know, I do believe that there is maybe a naivete that they could break the United States could break Russia from China. But Russia goes in and says, yeah, we'll talk about normalization with you, but there's never going to be a concession that Russia makes where it says, oh, we'll normalize with you and we will move away from China. There's no way that happens. Your thoughts about this? Because I think this gets into the misunderstanding of, yes, there can be short-term economic gain for the U.S. and Russia for normalization, but to think that Russia will abandon the East, abandon the global South, abandon the BRICS is
no way.
One, just not even on the table, and they say it all the time. But your assessment?
Absolutely not. And I'm looking forward 2 weeks from now. I'm going to be on a crazy schedule. I'll be arriving in Beijing at the end of the SCO summit, which is in Tianjin, very close to Beijing. So I'll try to go to Tianjin for the conclusion of the SMO. Oh, the SMO. I'm so sorry, of the SCO, where, by the way, Putin and Xi will be there in Tianjin. The problem is I have to go to Vladivostok and do all the logistics before. It's very complicated before the start of a summit. And the summit starts on September 3. So I'm going to miss the big parade in Beijing on September 3, but I will be in Vladivostok, which is a great thing. You know why? Because at the end, the plenary session, who's going to address the plenary session? Vladimir Putin in person. And usually, Danny, he speaks for 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
So we're going to have from Putin directly the post-Alaska thing for the first time live, because during the parade in China, probably he's not going to speak anything about Alaska. He's going to speak about it in Vladivostok. So this week is going to be, wow, a real bomb. Starting on first is a Monday, the third Wednesday, and the fifth is when Putin talks to the plenary session. This week is going to be wow. And then we're going to have the Russia-Chinese position very, very clear, not only on what was discussed in Alaska, but the bigger geoeconomic and geopolitical discussion.
Yeah, talk about because, as we head into the last bit here, last 10 minutes or so, talk about the significance of the SCO. I mean, we have Modi. He's going to be there.
There's
going to be an exchange, a meeting between Xi and Putin. Xi and Modi. There will be likely with Putin too, but Xi and Modi are going to meet. And this is, again, another example, in my opinion, of the ways in which Trump, as you said, has really brought BRICS together. But talk about the significance of this. We haven't been able to get to it in the time intervening.
Well, Danny, can you imagine anybody on Trump 2.0 that understands the SCO? Forget it.
SCO.
CEO. No, it's not CEO. It's SCO. Well, that kind of stuff. If they don't understand BRICS, SCO for them is something like that comes out from Pluto. Very, very important. Years ago, the first guy who actually said, in the near future, it's inevitable that BRICS and SCO will merge. Who was that? Lukashenko. Old Luka, he's always looking ahead. And by the way, he caused immense impression on Trump. Trump was absolutely fascinated by Lukashenko. So he's quite something. And he always is looking long term. No question. He is also a member of the SCO. Very, very important. Well, the fact that we're going to have Putin, Xi, and Modi in the same room in Tianjin, China, discussing basically the security of Eurasia face to face for the first time in the previous summit. What was it? In the previous two summits, I think the three of them were not together for some reasons. Xi didn't go, Modi didn't go, etc. Now the three of them, and I hope, oh my God, Pezeshkian is going to be there, because Pezeshkian is, it's hard. And I'm trying to, discussions that we have with our Iranian friends, but he's a tough pill to swallow. after Raisi. But
Right.
okay, at least if he's there, these four top BRICS will be on the same table, the four leaders. And although this involves everything, including the next Israel attack against Iran, with or without the US. So they need to discuss this among themselves. Common position, once again. So now the SCO this past few years is something we already discussed before. It has evolved from an organization basically centered on security and counterterrorism to economic cooperation. They discuss economic cooperation projects. These past summits in St. Petersburg this year and Vladivostok last year, the SCO roundtables are immensely interesting. And they discuss economics. Can you? I think we talked about that. Can you believe that last year in St. Petersburg, in one of the SCO tables, the Afghans were on the table and they were discussing economic investment in Afghanistan with Russian ministers, among others. Amazing. So this is what they do. So this is what they're going to be discussing in Tianjin, August 31st, September 1st. That's the end of the summit. And of course, with the Alaska in the background, even more important, because they will be discussing, again, the Russian concept of Eurasian-wide security. The Greater Eurasian Partnership, which it's the official Russian motto for Eurasia integration, and indivisibility of security, which is what the Russians proposed to the previous American administration in December 2021, indivisibility for all of you, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, post-Soviet space, us, etc. They'll be discussing this on once again on an Eurasian framework, a wider Eurasian framework. So if anybody on Trump 2.0, they think they can break BRICS and break the SCO at the same time, bye-bye. It's not going to happen. And we're going to see this again live in front of us 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, and your point about BRICS, well, SCO, that's the SCO with economic cooperation. I hope I can pull this up because, you know, I was in Ining, which is a city in the Kazakh Autonomous Prefecture in Xinjiang.
Very,
and it's beautiful. Oh my God, so beautiful there. And I visited a horse museum run by Uyghurs, actually. I don't know if people can see this. So I think now we can. I'm just going to zoom in. Shanghai Cooperation Organization Horse Themed Culture Museum. So this is, I mean, it's security, and it's also, it's everything between it. It's economic, cultural, and if anybody knows about Xinjiang in China, they know that horses are absolutely just so important. So you had Uyghur artists, Kazakh artists, selling their art, their horse art, and also there was a whole thing about preserving a certain kind of horse, very small horse. I didn't really understand that part of it, but it was great. But it just shows the significance of the SCO and how it goes much beyond, and BRICS too, much beyond just the idea of building some kind of other pull from the United States hegemony. It's also really about building and strengthening ties amongst each other. But your final comments on this, Pepe, as we close here.
Well, so these next few weeks are going to be incandescent, to say the least. Because now, in a certain sense, the ball is in Trump's court. He won't be able to sell it, but he'll have to try to explain to this immense universe anti-peace in Ukraine and even anti-normalization of US-Russia relations, what was discussed in Alaska and what should come next. Of course, Zelensky is a two-bit actor. He doesn't count for anything. And his successor has already been chosen. And that's an enormous problem already, because if the successor, via dodgy means, is really Zaluzhny, we're back to square one. So we would have to have real popular elections in Ukraine, which is still a prospect as distant as another Milky Way. And of course, don't forget the people who run the show in the US and the Atlanticist elites and those famous families that obviously we cannot pronounce their names. They are very, very pissed at what happened in Alaska yesterday. And they will come back with full force. There's no question about that. So Trump now has to fight all these at the same time. Will he have the stamina for it? We don't know. Will he have enough power against all of them? Probably not. But his plan B is already ongoing. He already has the headline if nothing works. Look, I tried everything. We discussed in detail with Putin, assuming there is the next meeting in the Russian Federation. But Europe and Kiev, they don't want peace. So this is their problem. It's their war. Let them fight it. So he already has an escape route, which from his point of view, which basically is, okay, let's try to do a deal. If there's no deal, there is a sub deal. It's already cool. And from the Russian point of view, it's quite similar, in fact. They didn't need Alaska. They didn't need this summit. They only went because they received, once again, Ushakov, an acceptable proposal. If the proposal doesn't materialize, they could even continue to invest with side by side with the Trump administration in some sort of normalization of U.S.-Russia relations, even bypassing Ukraine. This is going to be immensely difficult, but business is business, right? And elimination of a set of very directed, targeted sanctions against Russia. This is possible. Trump can do this with an executive order. Very, very simple. And of course, very, very important, Danny, and all of you, the SMO continues. Yeah. The war continues. The war will not stop. Very important. They already agreed, according to Trump himself, no ceasefire. So this means the SMO keeps going on. Can you imagine what could happen within the next 3 months, assuming things go extremely slow, which they will, obviously. In the next 3 months, the collapse of practically the whole front line is practically a given. And then once again, we'll go back to Medinsky in one of those Istanbul meetings. Okay, you don't want our deal now. Next time, it's not going to be 4 regions. It's going to be 8. Quite possible. Quite possible. So let's say that both sides, they have their plan B already. And of course, they are, let's say, let's try to be magnanimous. They are putting their faith on, okay, let's reset our relations. Let's see if plan A works. If it doesn't, this reset, at least between Trump 2.0 and Moscow, is quite possible in many levels. Yeah. And of course, there's a major problem inbuilt in all that. This will also depend on how Trump is going to treat the other BRICS from now on. Because we don't know, of course, Danny and all of you, to what level they discussed BRICS on the table. But I'm sure Putin, especially, tried to show Trump, look, we are one of the top members of BRICS. And of course, we are all under assault and we're all under sanctions by your government. Is this going to change? Or are you willing to reconsider many of these sanctions? That's part of this. That's part of the secret part of the deal, right? That we don't know, unless there are leaks on both sides. And but apparently, it's they were instructed to be extra tight-lipped on both sides.
Pepe, it was great to be with you, everyone. We have more show to come, but Pepe, people can find your work in the video description on Telegram and on X, so be sure to check that out after the show is over. Pepe, it's great to be with you. We'll have to catch up after the SEO, get more details, all of that.
I'll be in China. Yeah, I'll be in
we'll have
China.
to
I'll
work
be
that
on the
out.
road in China, which is even better.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers.
Well, I'll be in touch with you. Take care. Great
Thank
being
you.
with you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Cheers, everybody. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We have more show to come. I'm going to bring on my next guest right away. It is Mark Sleboda. He's an international security affairs analyst, geopolitical analyst. You can find his work on Boosty. I put that in the video description. Mark, good to be with you.
Danny, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Yes, always great to be with you. So how about we get to your reaction of the Putin-Trump Summit? I wanted to just pull up. I didn't get to pull up some of the funny, I think, almost humorous optics. So here you have Donald Trump looking very strong.
This is the U.S. president looking tough.
Yes. This is shared by the White House. I want people to be able
They
to
managed
see
to
that.
find one picture that body language conveys that in the entirety of the summit. Yes.
And then there was this photo that was being shared around, because I think the optics kind of get into what really happened. Here you have Putin on the tarmac. People were saying, okay, Trump looked very tough, and then boom, people missed that. The Western mainstream media especially missed that. But Mark, what exactly happened here in your estimation? No deal, no agreement came out, even though Trump said that there was going to be, a deal worked out on Ukraine. Both sides are being very quiet about the details, but what's your assessment?
Yeah, I think really not much happened. I think that we could say that temporarily Trump got rewound like a wind-up toy to where he was a few months ago, and then he'll proceed to unwind back, basically to the same position where he was just before the summit in, I imagine, a not too long period of time. I think that, if there's absolutely one thing that was conveyed through this summit is that the Russia's intervention in the Ukrainian civil conflict, the SMO, will continue until its inevitable end on the battlefield. That's it, right? There is not going to be any diplomatic settlement. There is not going to be any reset of relations between the U.S. and Russia, no matter how much Donald Trump may, in his heart of hearts, if he has a heart, or the gold painted thing that's inside his chest anyway. One thing that I see from all of this is that on a personal level, which, being a structural realist, I don't actually believe the personal level is usually that important, right? I'm neither a great supporter nor a complete discounter of the great person view of international politics, but I don't think Trump really reaches that level. On a personal level, I think Trump, if you toss back up that picture, the last one that you had, just
Sure.
on there again.
Let me see if I have it still. Here we go. This one.
Yeah, what I see and what makes the most sense to me throughout the long course of this is here we see a young boy starstruck by his idol, right? Receiving some advice, perhaps a little bit of lecturing. That's what I see. And I think if we try to understand if we try to psychoanalyze Trump, right, which I think is problematic when we do that, but that's I guess to a certain extent the name of the game, because he is such a a quixotic and mercurial personality, chaos bomb to be sure. But that's on a personal level what I read from Trump. How else to explain his long attempts over time to drift, and he certainly treats Putin with a respect and a deference that he does no other world leader. Although he did just in a social media post in the last week called Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, the highly respected president of Belarus, and a million deep state souls in the U.S. and across the West cried out in agony at those words.
Yeah.
Brief amount of torture, but ultimately, the one thing I read from this is how powerless Trump is, how much he is driven by the institutions, whether we're talking a bipartisan congressional consensus, of staying the foreign policy course against Russia, the deep state, the blob, the permanent bureaucracy, the intelligence services, the State Department, whatever you want to call that, the military-industrial complex, the think tanks, the institutions, but also the Europeans and Kiev, right? They're all against. And in his first administration, Trump wanted desperately, it seemed at times, to find common ground and improve relations with Kim Jong-un. And he was allowed, a certain amount of play on the leash for that. But when it got too far, his own handpicked staff, John Bolton, gloating that he, how it was done at the time, carefully, they arranged for that all to be manipulated away. And I imagine that in the coming weeks, we will see this brief period of, Donald Trump desperately, trying to peer out of the glass bubble of the U.S., the hegemon's institutions that he's in, and he'll be dragged back in. At one hand, we had Trump coming out of this. Now he's back to where he was a few months ago, in that he's once again at least temporarily towing the Russian line, that there won't be a ceasefire. What we need is a permanent peace. And he briefly adopted this a few months ago after one of his first phone calls with Putin. And then he was slowly walked back by his own, state institutions and the Europeans to the demanding an unconditional ceasefire, on just 2 days ago, right? So he's been walked by that. At the same time, European leaders are also saying that he is now promising Ukraine security guarantees. What does that mean, right? He was desperately denying Ukraine any security guarantees. So, one step forward, two steps back. I ultimately don't think that this really changes much in the grand course of things. It was a spectacle. We were all entertained. Were we not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is that not why
we were.
You are here, right? Is that not why you elected Donald Trump, to be entertained? We had some spectacle, we had some hype, we had some pomp, we had some gnashing of teeth and some hysteria from the appropriate sides. But ultimately, I don't think that this really matters that much. I don't think it's going to change anything in the course.
I wanted to ask you, Mark, because I agree especially about the not changing anything. And, a lot of people in the collective West in the United States who follow these developments, who follow channels like mine, they are very, they view Vladimir Putin as very strong, even though Vladimir Putin does not, his demeanor, the way he goes about things, he's not going in there. He's not going in anywhere looking like he's ready to box. He's going in there ready to negotiate, ready to be diplomatic.
Ironically, because out of any world leader, he is the
yeah,
one.
because he does, doesn't he? He has a black
Diplomatic
belt or something like that.
monster.
Anyway, wrestling bears or anyway, but I feel like he came out of this looking incredibly strong. Even just the presser, Mark, he took 66, 2/3 of the presser himself. And then Donald Trump went up there and was just like winging it. But Vladimir Putin had 8+ minutes prepared of a very short non-presser presser where he just outlined the whole thing. He came in there and then he left, and he had Fox News. He had the Western media.
Root causes, punch those words.
Panicking. So talk about this, because that's a big takeaway for me is Vladimir Putin went into the United States. Western media, even though they always love to hype up the danger of Putin and Russia, I think that their fear in this respect is that, Putin is, he's not someone to be pushed around or made to budge on issues that are absolutely existential for Russia as a whole. But and that was a big takeaway for me. What was your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin doesn't sweat. I'm pretty sure he's been biologically engineered to never sweat. Right. I mean, that's he doesn't shake. He doesn't, get flustered. He doesn't do anything that is not always calm, ice cold, cool, and professional, and eminently diplomatic. Right. Professional, diplomatic, the very archetype, the very epitome of a statesman, of a global statesman. And it drives the West absolutely insane, especially, when they keep electing, half-dead corpses, geriatric dementia-ridden corpses and orange narcissistic buffoons, like this, and I mean, it's not only even at the presidential level. I mean, let's just go down the list of the equivalents in terms of capability on both sides of this summit. I mean, is anyone seriously going to compare Lavrov and Rubio in terms of diplomacy and foreign policy? I mean, one of my favorite moments of this entire summit was Lavrov swaggering in to the facilities in Anchorage wearing an SSSR sweatshirt. That to me was just trolling of. I mean, he put Medvedev to shame. I mean, he did with that, and he did it with such absolute authority and everything. It's just incredible. They went the Western media just they went batshit insane during this whole affair. Even on the tarmac, we hear them shrilly screaming out, right, as Putin and Trump were meeting and shaking hands. President Putin, when will you stop killing civilians? Right? Which that this is the most. How can Donald Trump ever trust you? I mean, like, in terms of doing what he says, right? I don't know, like say entering negotiations and not immediately bombing a country during those. I like some other president I know, or inviting a foreign leader over for negotiations in a third country and then assassinating him, gloating about it afterwards. I mean, are these people for real? I mean, they are utterly. I've long understood that they are utterly incapable of understanding or perceiving their own hypocrisy. They live in a completely a world where they are absolutely incapable of critical self-reflection to the minutest degree.
And let's play this, Mark, if we can, because I want to show this moment and exactly what you're referencing with the Western media.
Comedy.
Western media literally going bat crazy over Putin just being.
It's the same woman yelling too. That was on
everybody needs to look at this.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go. Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
I mean, this face
He's just having fun. This is Putin having fun. I mean, this is
Memes.
bizarre.
I mean,
right? This was the moment when his exterior cracked the most.
yes,
where we let in, and he was laughing it up. He was enjoying all of this.
he was prepared too. He was so prepared for the entire moment, and then he stepped out of Russia into the United States and was like, "Oh, they let the animals out of the cage."
And Donald Trump actually said something like that. Like, you see what I have to deal with. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, to call those shrilly screaming propagandist voices, they're not journalists, right? They're not in any sense of the word, right? They're just trying, they desperately sense that Donald Trump is not doing the expected job as president of the hegemon in attacking the leader of Russia. So they're trying to step in, for those shoes. That's the way I read that. But yeah, I mean, they were just ignored. They were dismissed. And it has to be said, right? I mean, let's just address the insanity of that question. Let's entertain it for just a second. The civilian casualties, the collateral damage in the conflict in Ukraine are ridiculously low for a conflict of its intensity and size, right? I mean, it's unheard of. The numbers of women and children killed, like specifically, are minute, right? I mean, and what there are, most of those casualties are almost certainly being occurred on the Kiev regime forces side. When you hear, when you read headlines and hear reports, Russia launched 300 missiles and drones across Ukraine overnight, and 1 person was killed and 3 were injured. Think about that for a second. How is that even possible? How do you fire 300 drones and missiles, right? Most of them obviously reaching, they were intercepted by their targets, quite obviously. The Russia goes to the most extraordinary lengths, right? Obviously, it cares far more about the Ukrainian people than the Western leaders and journalists do. Now, let's compare that, of course, which will never be done in the Western media, to the civilian casualties when Trump was just a few months ago bombing Yemen, right? Or, dare we even go and mention the civilian casualties when Netanyahu is bombing all of the Gaza Strip into ruins, right? With exactly the goal. I mean, that is what a campaign that not only does not care about civilians, but actually goes out of its way, to harvest, shall we say, a certain number of them looks like. And when you see the numbers of women and children as a percentage of those killed, right, that becomes completely obvious that, it's not military age fighting men. Half or more of what is killed are women and children. That is, there should be people shrilly crying out to Netanyahu, when will you stop killing civilians? Not Vladimir Putin, right? But again, do we expect anything different from the Western media at this point? No, of course not. So, but I saw Putin was absolutely in control, right? He felt confident, comfortable. They knew what they were coming here to say and do. They said it and they left. And quite obviously, although both sides are playing up how great it was 10 out of 10. The reality, of course, is that it was quite different. There was originally, according to the reports, supposed to be a one-on-one meeting between Putin and Trump, right? Translators present, and then a 5-on-5 meeting. And then that got changed so that the first meeting would be a 3-on-3 meeting, which was Trump, Rubio, and I believe it was Witkoff, and Putin, Lavrov, and I'm not sure if it was Dmitriev or Ushakov, but it was 3-on-3. And that lasted 3 hours. And then that was it. There was supposed to be a joint luncheon. There was supposed to be a second meeting.
I
All
was
of that
hearing 7 hours, and then it was an hour and a half. So I was here. I was like 7 hours. What are they going to talk about for 7 hours? But continue.
Yeah, all of the rest was canceled, right? And then there was supposed to be a presser, right? A joint press conference afterwards. And I'm just like, oh, Vladimir, why did you agree to this nonsense, right? You know, that slavering pack, that horde of shrilly screaming zombies. And it wasn't a thing because they didn't take any questions from the press. As you said, they both made, and not only did they, Putin went first. That's unheard of. That's not protocol. Protocol.
He was almost first and last.
Yeah, he was, because then he jumped in English at the end and said next time in Moscow. Right. But this is another thing that shocked the Western. Not only did they not get, were they all dragged there to the the ass end of America, as it were, right? For this this spectacle. But then they weren't even allowed to ask any questions other than those they were shrilly screaming out at a distance and being apparently mocked by President Putin for uttering. So that's again a break in protocol. It's really hard to understand, and it's hard to read as anything but Trump ceding. I think he recognizes, Trump always loves playing these alpha dog games, these puerile dominance games with every other world leader, right? We've seen these ridiculous handshakes that he does with Macron. Erdogan does the same thing. I think Erdogan is even better. And he briefly tried it with Putin. That was obvious. And Putin just didn't budge. I mean, who are you? Putin is a judo black belt. Get real.
Putin's got biceps.
he was completely ready for it. He didn't even strain over a guy who towers over him by a foot and, I don't know, a significant amount of body mass. Let's just say that. And Putin just didn't budge. Again, I don't know if the man's human. But it was Trump just ceded alpha dog status to Putin the entire time. And he showed him deference. He showed him a respect that he shows no other world leader. Again, it's hard to read it any other way on a personal level. Ultimately, I don't think that personal level matters, because Trump will never be allowed to make the decisions to bilaterally improve relations with Russia, no matter what goes on with Ukraine. And if there's one thing, every time something like this happens, I have a fear that the old Vladimir Putin, who, before 2014 or, even up till 2022, his caution and an appeal to diplomacy and legalism has always been his hallmark. But there was no concessions. There was no concessions made. I know they're trying to spin some of the same nonsense. Putin will agree to freeze the contact line in Kherson and Zaporozhye if Zelensky pulls all of his forces out of Donbass. What they have left there. And I'm like, why would Russia agree to that? They're
violate its own constitution. Violate your own constitution.
Not only the constitution, but they're gonna have Donbass wrapped up by the end of the year. I mean, they're destroying the Kiev regime in Donbass right now. The breakthroughs are just exceeding all expectations, including mine, showing that the butcher's bill of a nearly 3 long year war of attrition is now coming due, right? That's what's happening. We're seeing the effects of that. We're not seeing a complete collapse, not yet, the way some people have been predicting every 2 months since this conflict began, but we are seeing a crumbling. We're seeing an inability to man the entire front lines, and that's what has led to the deep penetration in the operational crisis in the Pokrovsk rear. And that, I want to make clear, That is why this summit happened, right?
Yeah.
It's not. The Western media tried to spin it the other way around. Oh, Russia's making an extra effort to improve their position before the summit, right, for leverage. It was the exact opposite, right?
Right.
Russia already started to destroy the Kiev regime in the Pokrovsk direction. And it was then that, oh, if you don't stop this and agree to a ceasefire in 50 days, then secondary sanctions on the, tariffs on the rest of the world for daring to trade with you. And then they got more panicked, right? And then it was 10 or 12 days, right? And we'll sanction the rest of the world. This, I don't know if you, this skit, I don't think much of Eurasia Group and Ian Bremmer, but there was this skit on the clown show they do on G0 Media called Trump Comes Out Swinging. You can find it on YouTube, Puppet Regime. And Trump is angry. You've got to agree to a ceasefire. You've got to do what I say. No, yet, right? And then, all right, I'm going to do something really strong. And he comes and he punches Modi in the face.
Yeah.
and then Putin's like, holy shit, right? And he's like, why did you hit me, right? And it's just like, well, someone's got to pay the price for Putin not doing what I say, and it's not going to be me. And Xi Jinping is there, and Modi says, well, why didn't you hit him? He's helping, he's buying more from Russia than I am. And Trump is like, well, we talked and it's complicated. And they have leverage over me and you don't. So, that was the deal. But that was the next stage. And then the third stage was, we have to meet next week, right? You have to agree to a ceasefire next week. Why? Because they're panicked. Because obviously the media, the elite, the rhetoric, this is never said. But some people at some level are sounding alarm bells that the Kiev regime's military forces are crumbling now to an unprecedented degree. And there's no sign, there's only, signs that the Russian military is getting stronger every single day. And the Kiev regime forces are getting weaker every single day. And there's absolutely nothing they can do, not economically, not militarily, not politically, to reverse that. That is why the insistence, we have to get a ceasefire to save our proxy regime in Kiev. And this whole thing was arranged as a pressure trap, right? Invite him to Alaska, roll out the red carpet for him, pursuing peace on our terms, on all these big billboards, right? And Putin stayed by his position. Peace, yes, on our terms, when the root causes of the conflict, meaning the expansion of NATO and this Banderite regime that you helped bring to power in Kiev, are over. Right? That was it. And they did not budge from that position. I was extremely happy to see that. They stood their ground again, and then they went home.
Mark, I want to now get into, because I think your assessment is very astute, and I want to get into this combination of battlefield realities and what I saw with the Alaska summit and virtually everything leading into it, and now what we're going to see after it is Russia really, and Putin in particular, really scored a huge soft power. We talk about it a little bit here, soft power victory, in the sense that I want to show you, I've showed this before, how, and I think this is, even though people, Western media lying through their teeth, they're always Russia, 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 anti-Russia. I think the level of panic that you can hear out of Fox News after this meeting shows not just their hatred of Russia and Putin, but also how effective the soft power game for Russia was in just participating in this in the way that they did. Here's how Fox News reacted.
It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say.
So came in and steamrolled, and even just the tone of her voice is is panicked, and it comes as the Telegraph calculated in this piece. They're always talking about Ukraine. They're always now panicking. It seems like every other day, every other week, because of the battlefield reality. In this article, it literally says that 650,000 military-aged men have fled Ukraine to avoid fighting in this conflict over the course of it. So talk about this combination. It's a powerful and potent one, and I believe why Trump ceded that alpha dog status you talked about in the summit. There is a reality here, both on the battlefield and Russia's position going into any of these meetings with the United States. So your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to two things, right? The West is unable to accept, right, on a public level or at a geopolitical level, a Russian victory. They cannot accept it. They can't acknowledge it, right? At the same level, they are unable to prevent it, and they have no leverage against Russia to make them stop and to preserve this proxy regime that they've helped bring to power since 2014 in Kiev. Sanctions, right? 36, I lost count, 36,000, right? Sanctions against Russia in the last decade. And you know, I mean, Russia is still growing at a you know, in the last year at a faster clip than the US and most of Europe. So at least in GDP terms. You know, how many reports have we read, right? The mainstream media has grudgingly admitted they are out of missiles. It's not that Russia is out of missiles. It's not that Russia is out of tanks. It's not that Russia is out of all of these things, particularly air defense missiles, right? Interceptors and everything. It's they that are, right? And they are incapable of ramping up production because they exported all of their production to Asia, you know, in the last few decades. And, you know, how many times does the NATO Secretary General have to admit that Russia is outproducing all of NATO and their major allies, right, put together in the type of munitions and armaments that are needed for this type of conflict by 4 times. That is, Russia produces in 3 times what the entirety of the West does. And they have a lot of other military commitments around the world, right? Israel, China, you know, everything else. And Russia doesn't. So they have no cards, right? Trump can reach back in that quiver, right, to pull something out and punish Putin, but there's nothing there. And Russia continues to advance on the battlefield, and they're panicking, and they acknowledge all these things, but it's not allowed to affect their narrative. They never internalize it. They always fall back on the denial of this reality, because at some fundamental level, I think it challenges both the world order that they've created, you know, the unipolar hegemonic moment since 91, but it also challenges their own identity, their belief in the way the world works and their place in that world, right? Which is governed ultimately, right? Whether we're talking the political elites, the media elites, right? You know, it's all the same thing. It's exceptionalism, right? In the US variant, in the Western variant, it is a messianic, supremacist ideology that tells them, that informs them, and they utterly believe this to their core, right? It is indoctrinated into them in schools, in universities, in institutions, right? That they are structurally, societally, and above all, morally superior to every other country, state, civilization on the face of the earth. And therefore, they not only have the right, but they have a duty to run the world. That is indoctrinated to them in the core, right? Putin recently said something that he came to understand that it's all about geopolitics, right? And not ideology, right? And it always was that was the case. And I disagree, because the West is completely driven by ideology. And I believe that this Western ideology of exceptionalism is the single most dangerous ideology for the world today. And it's being shocked again and again. I mean, you can even go back to 2008 and the August War in Georgia, and Russia has shocked them again and again and again. And China's economic rise, despite everything being done to shock it again and again and again. And Iran's resilience, and it's getting harder and harder to ignore their strength against what the US and Israel are able to deploy against them in the Middle East again and again and again, and don't fall. It's shocking their identity, their belief in who and what they are and how the world works, and their place in the world is being just challenged, shocked, by all of this. And they keep retreating into this fantasy world where, even as they will occasionally and grudgingly admit facts, those facts then slip out, and they are unable to process and internalize it all. And that's why this conflict will go on, right? Find me a European leader, other, of course, than, let's say, Orban and Fico, who, whether we're talking political or military, right, that is not now swearing again and again and again repetitively, we are going to be at war with Russia soon, in 10 years, in 5 years. I keep hearing 2 years now. And that is their intention, to drag out Ukraine's agony as long as they can, to the point where they believe they'll be able to fight Russia directly, right? And of course, it's not going to be Russia invades NATO. It's probably not even going to be NATO invades Russia, at least not, pre 2014 Russia. It is going to be that they move troops into Ukraine. And if not Ukraine, then in some country like Moldova, or, another regime change attempt in Belarus, or even maybe somewhere in the South Caucasus. That is where the conflict is going to come from, because they cannot give up hegemony. They cannot accept defeat to Russia. They will continue to push forward to try to expand NATO and to crush, to strangle Russia and cause it to disintegrate, right, through this pressure cooker strategy of RAND corporations. They can't stop. They cannot stop. The institutions that create the people and the beliefs that lead up to this, one's gone and the next one is only more inculcated in those beliefs, right? We've had a change over the last decade, or 2 decades, but really the last decade. And the new European elite is just as fervent, if not more fervent, in their Western exceptionalism than Americans have been in American exceptionalism. And that's something new, right? It's not the Europe anymore of Chirac and Schroeder. That Europe is gone, right? These are European countries, Western countries. It's not only Europe, Canada, Australia, that are, at least at the moment, more committed to US-led Western global hegemony than the current occupant of the White House is. They can't give up. So that's why, even if this conflict ends, if it's never going to end, right? It's frozen, goes into guerrilla phase, whatever. It is only a pause, because there is not going to be any. I know the Kremlin wants some type of peace settlement, right? A new security architecture for Europe, right? That would secure, that would restore, if not goodwill, then at least some type of diplomatic and business normality. That is not possible. They're not going to get this coming out of this. However, the conflict in Ukraine ends, whether it ends on Kherson, Zaporozhye, or in Kiev, or on the Polish border, however it ends, it is only going to lead, right? If not immediately, then over a very short period of time into that next conflict, because they are incapable of accepting the reality of the world that they live in, that unipolar moment is gone, that they are not exceptional, that they are not morally and structurally superior to Russia, or which isn't to say that Russia is superior to them either, not at the end of the day, but Russians don't believe that, right? Russians don't have that sense of universalism, of some divine mission the way they do. Russians are capable of self-criticism and reflection. They're not.
Talk about because all of this speaks to when I assess the overall situation between the United States and Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, but really just in general, the posture. You see that on the one hand, you have Russia, of course, they're going to champion diplomacy. That is the approach, and that is I think a strong soft power approach from a very understandable standpoint. But then you have this reality that you just spoke to. You're never going to see a U.S. president shake Vladimir Putin's hand and say, we are now cooperating, because it gets at the heart of what you just talked about with American exceptionalism. Russia has to be dominated, not cooperated with. And then there's this reality I want you to get into. I haven't been able to update viewers in too much detail about the battlefield reality, where it appears, and I think this is there's strong evidence to this, that Russia is saying that the solution to this conflict is going to be military. It's going to happen militarily, and regardless of how it ends, this is likely going to be something Russia has to deal with for quite a long time. So talking about the battlefield reality here, because that is what really blows up American exceptionalism in so many ways, because that battlefield was supposed to be where, regardless of whether people think the United States wanted to topple Russia or just keep Russia extended for as long as possible through the conflict, it was supposed to go well either way. It wasn't supposed to go poorly, and it's going poorly. So your assessment, Mark.
Yeah. Your observations about the soft power are on point, and they're interesting, because soft power, right, is about the battle for your minds, right? That's what's going on here. It's a battle for what you out there watching this are thinking. That is the battlefield space, the information space. And it's all about perceptions and narrative, right? That goes as true for other elites around the world, right? They're the targets of this as well as the common people. And soft power, is often very language and culture dependent, right? It only so much of it filters through language and information space barriers, of which countries like China have, immense digital sovereignty and security, right? So that level of filtration is even less. But what we saw, the visuals that came out of Alaska, are a kind of universal soft power victory. Because, other than that one picture that they managed to find and of Trump, with his finger, all the other visuals, of course, tell another story. And to anyone paying attention, all of this demands, right? If Putin doesn't agree to what we say, then there'll be very severe consequences. There'll be tariffs. There'll be rearming Kiev. There'll be all these punishments, right? And then Putin walks out of there and they don't get that. And everyone just kind of like, we're going to ignore that we didn't get that because we don't have the ability to punish them. That to anyone paying attention, I think that is a soft power victory that comes through as well. And it's simply about power, about who has power to force the other one. And I wouldn't say that Russia has the power yet to force the West, right? But they have the power to resist, right? Which is already enough when, we're dealing with a situation moving from a hegemon to a multipolar system. They are not only able to resist, right? They're able to defy. And that's what we see going on. I saw also in the wake of this another Fox News clip where there was a male guy's supposed to be a political analyst or talking about how everything screams that it's Putin that's desperate, that he's the one with no cards here. And I'm like, what planet are you on, buddy? I mean, do you actually believe that? Or is this just the spin that you're trying to, to conflict to deflect that soft power damage that was done by all of this? But again, because the very fact that this summit happened, right, is a result of what is happening on the battlefield. The battlefield is driving everything. And all of this panic, all of this threats that are never coming through, it's not so much Taco. It's not that Trump always chickens out. Is that Trump is bluffing. He may not realize it at the time, but his people are presenting him with policy options that they are not capable of following through, at least not without, eventually there has to be an assessment before those policies are enacted of what kind of blowback and damage they'll suffer themselves from following through that. And then they realize there isn't really an option there, right? That's why, Trump is just back and forth, right? He realized that at some point that he threatened tariff sanctions, right, on the rest of the world that he couldn't follow through on. And then he arranged this summit and, that seemed to kick that can down the road. So he didn't have to deliver on something that he realized that he couldn't do. And then right before the summit, he was back to threatening tariffs and severe consequences again. And it's just like, what are you doing? You created an escape clause for yourself, right? Out of threats that you made that you can't fulfill. And now you're following back on those same threats. This is not 5D chess, right? This is a president and what's more, an administration that doesn't have any idea what the fuck it's doing. And that is just stumbling from one often self-generated crisis to another, right? And just declaring victory everywhere. We're always winning, right? We heard
6 peace deals.
Yeah, we heard this. There was this truth social media post in the last week where Trump responded angrily to comments about John Bolton, right, about the consequences of that 25% punitive tariffs on India, now driving India to improve relations with Russia, and it must be said China, right? They're getting back into they're restoring direct air flights with China. They are, restoring trade with China. Modi's going to Beijing. When Trump first announced those comments, the first thing is I turned to my wife and I said, "That's great. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thanks for doing that." And she was mystified, and I explained it to her how
I said when it comes to the tariffs on them, I'm always like, keep going. Keep going. Yeah.
Make it 500%. Do
Yeah,
it. Do
hey,
it.
1,000, whatever, man. It just the effect is the same.
The more you try to tighten your grip, the more star systems it will slip through your grasp. If I invoke a New Hope Star Warsism, Princess Leia there. But that's, you know, at some point, there is going to come, we're seeing this crumbling of forces, right? And it's still being extremely underreported in the Western press about, you know, how significant these are, of the Ukrainian commanders, you know, screaming about how critical this operational crisis in the rear is. But you're going to start eventually to see major settlements fall that they can't hide. Not only Pokrovsk, right? You know, not only Konstantinovka and Liman and Kupansk and Seversk, right? Which are all going to be on the chopping block within the next few months, right? Not just Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, most likely by the end of the year or close after that. But what are they going to do when Russian forces reach and cross the Dnieper River? What are they going to do when Russian forces are moving on Kiev? If we're at this level of hysteria, and then this you know, bizarre backtracking, and then, you know, returning to the completely fictitious narrative, right, as a response, you know, to that, what are we going to do when we get to that situation? Because we're going to reach that, because again, there is no diplomatic settlement in sight. There's absolutely nothing that they agree on. You know, Trump is now talking peace deal instead of ceasefire, but he's also talking security guarantees, which ultimately, of course, means NATO troops, either US troops or European troops, on the ground in Ukraine, which is exactly what Russia's entire intervention was meant on preventing in the first place. So there's no sign of any agreement, right? Even as Russia's position becomes stronger and stronger, as dictated on the battlefield, but it's starting to show in the diplomatic field and you know, as well. And when we're talking soft power, right, we're usually talking mostly about the perception, the narrative within the English language media sphere, because that's still dominant in the world. But outside of that sphere, right, in the media of the developing world, the global south, right, the non-West, the perception is just, you know, the strength of Russia in soft power terms is just increasing enormously, right? China, in fact, they might start to be concerned about that at some point, because yeah, it's very true that, you know, Russia is bearing most of the military burden and the defying, right, of the West, right? They're the one that is actually doing the confronting. And Iran recently, briefly, and probably again, almost certainly, it must be said, and North Korea has now chipped in too, but China is still sitting in the back, right, growing stronger, right? That meme that China does nothing and wins, it's still true. There was some data points on economic numbers and charts out this week that China's manufacturing exports now exceed that of the US, Japan, and Germany all put together. That's madness, right? And despite all of this attempts to try to curtail China's exports are still growing. They've reached new highs. At the same time, the U.S. just passed the $37 trillion national debt line. I mean, those economic realities that, again, the West will admit these things, but then it's not allowed to, they're never allowed to sustain. They're never allowed to form any new narrative. They're always, then they just drop on through. And it's back to the rhetoric and the belief, right? I mean, there's still people you'll encounter, not just people, but journalists, but commentary, political scientists, who will still say absolutely ridiculous, Baghdad Bob level stick your head in the sand things like China can't innovate. Or Russia can't innovate, or that Russia is Nigeria with snow, or a gas
can't
station.
innovate. They just literally destroyed you on the most important high technology AI. And now you even have some emissions of this, and it gets worse and worse though, Mark. I want your final comments actually, because I'm going to show this too. We know that Trump punted the tariff war on China again for another 90 days, and that trade surplus for China looking real good, growing at 5%, as you said. Do nothing and win.
Again, Ian Bremmer had a puppet regime clip on that, where Trump is threatening Xi Jinping over the phone, and he's like, if you don't agree to my terms, then I'm going to, and you hear this sound like a roulette wheel on a game show spinning, extend the exemptions for another 90 days.
So everyone, turn up your volume because I want you, Mark, because I think this is a good place to wrap up here. It's that exact segment that you cited that just oozes of American exceptionalism, and also just a complete deflection of reality when it comes to the Ukraine conflict, and really the reality of the situation overall. But turn up your volumes, everyone, because I think the audio might be a little low, but here we go.
No kidding. I think it's a huge win for President Trump, for the United States. There is but one superpower in this world. It's the United States of America, both militarily and economically. You had the visuals on the military side, but both President Putin and President Trump talked about the economic strength. I also don't think this is all about Ukraine. I think they probably had a discussion that was much broader than that. I think this has to do with China. I think it has to do with Israel. I think it has to do with where Vladimir. You think they talked about all that? I think they do mention that. I don't think they go 3 hours with maps. Well, because I think they actually go through and they want to talk about all of these places on where Russia is in the world. And we can push Russia around, because if Donald Trump decides to turn that knob and say, you're no longer going to be a participant in the world economy, then you're going to fall apart. That's why President Trump holds all the cards.
And that's why John Radcliffe going, don't you think, Jason?
Yes.
John Radcliffe going is important.
Howard Lutnick,
because he knows what's going on in Russia. He has the intelligence. So he says, listen, I know what he's telling you, Charlie Hurt. Radcliffe could say, but I'm going to tell you the reality, what's really happening in Russia. And this.
So yeah, good that Radcliffe was there to tell the reality of what's happening in Russia. We can just push Russia around, and turn that sanctions knob. I guess we skipped those last few years now, where that sanctions knob has been turned. But
this level of propaganda is just amazing. This is literally the emperor on stage, right, in a city square in medieval times, walking up with no clothes on. And this guy is the town crier with the bell in his hand. Look how great the emperor's clothes are. Oh my God, he's got such a great designer, right? It's just absolutely insane. The level of delusion here.
And nothing that he said too. Nothing that he said happened. First of all, Vladimir Putin doesn't go in there and say, "Yeah, let's talk about other people's stuff." No. Vladimir Putin's going in there and he's like, "Let's talk about Russia's stuff." Like, that's what Russia wants. Oh, of course they talk about China. Really? Is that what you think?
I think that if they had come to an agreement of some kind on Ukraine, and the conversation had continued for a few hours, they might have eventually gotten to things like the Middle East and China, right? And at least exchanged notes, right? Of how far apart their positions are. But in 3 hours' time, where they canceled the luncheon and later meetings, and no, they did not get to any of.
They didn't put maps down on the table and say, "No, Putin." Trump didn't say, "No, Putin, you don't get that. We get that." It's
we push you around, right? You know, I mean, is this guy living in a different reality where they haven't tried to sanction Russia for the last 10 years?
20,000
tens of thousands of sanctions, and the Russian economy still keeps growing. You know, is this guy, is he Jen Psaki screaming, the ruble is rubble? You know, I mean, it's amazing that.
And it's the Trump News Network too. That the big meltdowns came from the Trump News Network, from Fox News, from the GOP.
For all the meltdowns that occurred, this guy's he's step in there to toe the line, right? To maintain the delusion, right? I mean, this is like the Matrix is literally fritzing out on everyone who's still locked in those human battery bubbles, right? And then there's 1 second that screams on again, you know, and this guy is that second, you know.
Mark, it was a really good time here. Everybody, make sure you go to the video description after the show. You can find Mark on Boosty, support him there. All the links to support this show are also there. Patreon, Substack, and much more. I want to thank all the super chats. Oops, that's not the super chat. I want to thank everyone who gave a super chat as well. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for sending your Saturdays. Thanks to all the moderators. You all do a great job. Mark, any last words before we head out of here?
Yeah, I just hope everyone enjoyed the spectacle of this whole week. That's my takeaway from it, is at the very least, it was entertaining. And at the end of the day, is that not why you are here, to be entertained? I was entertained. I don't think anything else substantive will come out of this last week of all the you know, the speculation and who'll get what, you know, that we all did, you know, and every the peace deal and you know, what does Kiev think and what does Europe think? And at the end of the day, you know, it just didn't matter. It was all completely inconsequential. But at least we had a moment of entertainment. Are you not entertained?
Yeah. And I just want to say really quickly as we head out of here, I hope that this conflict has been a lesson that as we've talked about with American exceptionalism in the U.S., the U.S. empire's position, how it operates, Trump or no Trump, the only way you get what you want in the world stage is when those who want something different fight for it and they win. And that's exactly, I think, what Russia is showing, is that if they're going to get the security that they want, if they're going to get you know, this alternative order in the world that serves both Russia and the world far better than the current one, you have to fight and win it. That's and that's what's going to happen going to have to happen everywhere if people hope that this new world is going to bring even a better situation than the difficult one we're in now.
And just one final note on that vein, right? Even from the position of relative strength that Russia is in right now, militarily on the battlefield in Ukraine, politically with the rest of the world, economically, you know, defying and growing an alternate economy, or at least the kernels of it out of all of this. Putin is, you know, as the statesman, as eternally conscious, despite having all those cards, of very definite real world limitations on Russia's power and geopolitical horizons.
Of course.
Putin is still he's not going beyond what Russia's absolute national security concerns are. He's not bragging, he's not boasting, he's not setting unrealistic expectations. He's still bringing it all down real low and on the earth and said, you know, this is what we're capable of and this is what we're doing. And we'd still really, really prefer to talk our way and reason with you through all of this. But if you're not there, then, you know, what can we do?
Exactly. All right, everybody, hit that like button before you go. That helps keep the stream going after we are through. Again, the video description is all the places you can support Mark. And be sure to hit up the links for supporting this channel. I'll be back on Monday with Sean Fu and Richard Wolff to talk economics of geopolitics. With that said, we're heading out of here. Take care. Bye-bye.